You're pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people, they lynched people, they raped people, they enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. And so don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murder him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them.
And however much they want the past to be erased, unfortunately for them, what's already written in the history books is there and it will never be erased. Ladies and gentlemen, I get so happy when I see these people being called out by their fellow own. Why? Because we are living in an age where some of them are in denial. Now, when I see a white man literally say that, yo, we did A, B, C, D, and there is nothing we can do to change the future, and he breaks it down to his people, I love to see it.
You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. And so don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them. For God's sake, you want to do racist stereotypes? If it fit anywhere, and it doesn't, but if it fit anywhere, it would certainly fit white right-wingers in the South, who has hundreds of years of history of being savages. Savages!
Hey there. As you might imagine, I've received a hell of a lot of pushback on my recent posts about child SA, but almost all of it hangs on a report from the so-called Centre for Migration Control by one Robert Bates, a man so steeped in the hard right ecosystem and, surprisingly, a campaigner for Reform UK. You'll have seen the claims. Afghan men, Somalis and Albanians supposedly many times more likely to commit these kind of offences, and it's had my opponents frothing over the numbers as if they're some kind of slam dunk. Bates filed a Freedom of Information request to a handful of local authorities. He cherry-picked the responses and then span these scraps into sweeping claims about migrants as sexual predators. No peer review, no proper context, and a thunderingly dishonest dose of statistical sleight of hand. I strongly recommend you look up Lewis Aaron's excellent work dismantling Bates's methods. He shows the dishonesty with consummate elegance, and I'll link this great piece below. Yet as ever, the right-wing press and GB News have lapped it up, they've amplified it, and they've applied not a single modicum of scrutiny. I refer now to the most complete national dataset ever assembled on child SA, the 2025 CSA Centre report. It covers every recorded case in England and Wales where offender ethnicity was logged. I've captioned the figures above, and they show conclusively that white offenders are responsible for the overwhelming majority of cases. And more importantly, white men are the only group overrepresented per capita. Every other group is either proportionate or underrepresented. And yes, some cases don't log ethnicity, but when it's missed, it's usually white offenders who go unrecorded, which means the true figure for white offenders is almost certainly higher. So when people quote the dodgy dossier from Bates, they're not quoting the truth. They're repeating a distortion designed to stigmatize minorities and fuel hard right narrative that is incredibly dangerous to our social cohesion. If we really care about protecting children, we should work with evidence, not with weaponized misinformation. Thank you so much for listening again.
There are no right-wing movies. There is no right-wing media. There are no right-wing protests. There is no right-wing activism. You guys stand for fucking nothing. On top of that, most right-wingers are fans of leftist media. They're just so illiterate that they can't understand how it's leftist. They don't realize that the US is the evil empire in Star Wars, and Star Wars is based on Vietnam, where that Hunger Games was inspired by the US. The entire foundation of right-wing politics is hate. There is no improvement. There is no future. There is no better plan for everybody. There is subjugation information and problems. They don't talk about things they want to improve and then derive solutions from that. They blame current problems on random things. Immigrants are stealing our jobs. Deport everybody. Like, there's absolutely zero critical analysis of the issues of our society and why we have them. Instead, there's a childish game of blaming, ostracizing, dehumanizing not only their political enemies, but whatever new scapegoat that they've picked for this decade. It's so clear to everybody who is not a right-winger that the only point of being a right-winger is to preserve your own self-interest in your own small privileged bubble of reality. You are not concerned with the affairs of the world or of other people or of people who have it harder. That's why Make America Great Again is racist. When was America great for women? When was America great for black people? Like, these people literally couldn't fucking vote 70 years ago. And honestly, that's a whole different topic. So I'm just going to make a part 2 with about MAGA and why MAGA is just so problematic. Just the acronym.
Ever notice how much happier right-wing women are versus left-wing? This should be studied scientifically. Probably because they don't carry the burden of caring about others less fortunate than them or have a conscience or empathy. They don't grapple with their conscience every time they see someone struggling or in need. They don't have to feel the weight of empathy for the marginalized, the oppressed, the ones left behind by a system that favors the rich and the powerful. Instead, they live in a bubble of comfort, focused on their own success, their own happiness, unbothered by the suffering outside of their doors. They don't have to question the system because it works for them. They're protected by privilege and insulated from harsh realities that many others face. But here is the truth. This happiness is hollow. It's the result of willful ignorance, of turning a blind eye to the pain of others. It's a privilege that comes at the cost of moral responsibility. On the other hand, the left-wing woman, she's carrying the weight of the world. She's the one who asks questions. She's the one fighting for a better, more just society. And though it's a heavy burden, it's also the path to real change and real progress. So yeah, they might seem happier in the short term, but that happiness is built on apathy. True fulfillment comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. So don't trade your conscience for comfort. Stand up for something that matters.
20-year-old white men are now more right-wing than 75-year-old white men. This chart shows that 20-year-old white men voted for Kamala Harris at a way lower rate than 75-year-old white men. Young people went from the most progressive generation to the most conservative generation real fast. So you tell me, why is this shift even happening right now?
Every time a black person or a person of color commits an act of violence, the same people come out and tell us that we need to fix our culture. White right-wingers, usually males. So my question is, when are you going to fix your culture? Because your culture has been doing it for the longest. When is the pot going to stop calling the kettle black?